Diana checked her watch as she walked through the private terminal at Miami International Airport. The meeting in London was important and she couldn't afford to be late. As the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the world, her schedule was always packed. But this particular trip could change everything for her business. She had built her company from nothing. Starting in her small apartment just 10 years ago, she had turned a simple idea about cloud computing into a billion-dollar empire. Now at 38, she was flying to London to finalize a merger that would make her company one of the top 3 in the industry. The private terminal was quieter than usual. Diana preferred flying private for business trips. It saved time, and she could work during the flight without interruptions. She had her laptop bag slung over her shoulder and was pulling her small suitcase behind her. Her passport was already in her hand, ready to show the crew. The aircraft waiting on the tarmac was beautiful. It was a sleek white jet with gold accents, the kind that screamed luxury and success. Diana smiled slightly as she approached it. She had worked hard to get to this point in her life, and moments like these reminded her of how far she had come. At the bottom of the aircraft stairs, a flight attendant was waiting. The woman looked to be in her mid-40s with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun and a crisp blue uniform. Her name tag read Rebecca. She had the kind of smile that seemed professional but didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning," Diana said politely, extending her passport. "I'm ready to board." Rebecca took the passport but didn't immediately step aside to let Diana pass. Instead, she opened it and began examining it closely. Diana thought this was odd since she was the only passenger boarding at this gate, and her name should have been on the manifest. "Is there a problem?" Diana asked after Rebecca had been looking at the passport for what felt like a full minute. "Just checking everything," Rebecca replied, but her tone had changed. She was now holding the passport up to the light, squinting at it as if she was looking for something wrong. Diana felt her stomach tighten. She had traveled internationally dozens of times for business. Her passport was perfectly legitimate and had stamps from countries all over the world. She couldn't understand why Rebecca was taking so long. "Ma'am, I fly internationally every month for business," Diana said, keeping her voice calm and professional. "That passport has been through customs in 15 different countries in the past year alone." But Rebecca wasn't listening. She had called over another crew member, a man in his 30s who looked like he might be the co-pilot. They were both examining the passport now, whispering to each other and occasionally glancing at Diana. Other passengers had started boarding behind Diana. She could feel their eyes on her as the crew continued their examination. A businessman in an expensive suit cleared his throat impatiently. An older woman with pearls around her neck was tapping her foot. "Could we please speed this up?" Diana asked, her patience beginning to wear thin. "I have an important meeting in London, and I can't afford to miss this flight." Rebecca looked up from the passport with a suspicious expression. "Ma'am, I need to ask you a few questions. How did you obtain this passport?" Diana stared at her in disbelief. "How did I obtain it?" "I went to the post office and applied for it like everyone else in America." "And how did you afford the ticket for this flight?" Rebecca continued. The question hit Diana like a slap in the face. She could feel heat rising in her cheeks, but she fought to stay calm. "I'm sorry, what did you just ask me?" "This is a very expensive flight," Rebecca said, her voice getting louder. "I just want to make sure everything is legitimate here." The other passengers were openly staring now. Diana could hear them murmuring among themselves. She felt like she was on display, being judged and questioned simply for existing in this space. "I can afford this flight because I work hard and run a successful business," Diana said firmly. "Now may I please board the aircraft?" But Rebecca wasn't done. She had turned to the co-pilot and was speaking in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "This passport looks suspicious to me. The photo doesn't quite match, and some of these stamps look unusual." Diana felt her heart pounding. She knew her passport was completely legitimate. She also knew what was really happening here, even if no one wanted to say it out loud. This woman had taken one look at Diana, a successful black woman in business attire, and decided she didn't belong on this private jet. "There is absolutely nothing wrong with my passport," Diana said, her voice strong and clear. "I am a paying passenger, and I demand to be treated with respect." Rebecca exchanged a look with the co-pilot, and Diana could see them making a decision. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to verify this passport with security. This could take a while." "You're going to do what?" Diana couldn't believe what she was hearing. I have been flying on private jets for years.
I have never once had a problem with my passport.
This is completely unnecessary. But Rebecca had already pulled out her radio. She was calling for additional security to come and examine Diana's documents. The other passengers were getting restless, and Diana could hear them complaining about the delay. An older businessman stepped forward. Excuse me, but how much longer is this going to take? Some of us have important meetings to attend. Rebecca turned to address the other passengers, her tone completely different from the way she had been speaking to Diana. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, folks. We're just dealing with a documentation issue. We'll have this resolved as quickly as possible. Diana felt invisible standing there. Rebecca was talking about her as if she wasn't even present. The other passengers were nodding sympathetically, as if they were all victims of Diana's presence on their flight. Documentation issue? Diana repeated. My documentation is perfect. You are creating a problem where none exists. A security guard appeared at the gate. He was a large man with a serious expression, and Diana's heart sank as she realized how bad this situation was about to become. Rebecca handed Diana's passport to the security guard. We need this verified. Something doesn't seem right about it. The security guard took the passport and began his own examination. Diana watched as her legitimate travel document was passed from person to person, each one treating it like it was evidence in a crime scene. This is ridiculous, Diana said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You are delaying this entire flight because you have decided, for no legitimate reason, that my passport is somehow suspicious. The other passengers were starting to look uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. They just watched as Diana was subjected to this humiliating treatment. Rebecca crossed her arms and gave Diana a look that was pure challenge. Ma'am, if you have nothing to hide, then you should have no problem with us verifying your documents. Diana realized that this woman had no intention of backing down. Rebecca had committed to this course of action, and now she was going to see it through, no matter how wrong it was or how much time it wasted. As Diana stood there, watching her passport being treated like a piece of evidence, she made a mental note of everything that was happening. Rebecca had no idea who she was dealing with, but she was about to find out. The security guard handed Diana's passport back to Rebecca after what felt like forever. Everything looks fine to me, he said with a shrug. All the security features are there and the photo matches. Diana felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, this nightmare would be over and she could board the plane. But Rebecca wasn't satisfied. Are you sure? She asked the guard. Look at these stamps. Don't they seem like too many for someone her age? Diana's mouth dropped open. Too many stamps? I travel for business constantly. That's what happens when you run an international company. The security guard looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Diana, then back at Rebecca. Ma'am, I've seen plenty of passports from frequent travelers. This is completely normal. But Rebecca was determined to find something wrong. She took the passport back and began flipping through the pages more aggressively. These dates don't add up, she announced. Look here. She was supposedly in Japan on March 15th, then in Germany on March 18th. That's impossible. Diana couldn't believe what she was hearing. It's not impossible if you fly private, she said through gritted teeth. Which is exactly what I do for business trips. The other passengers were getting more impatient by the minute. Diana could hear them sighing and checking their watches. But instead of directing their frustration at Rebecca for creating this unnecessary delay, they seemed to be blaming Diana for the holdup. A woman in an expensive fur coat spoke up. How much longer is this going to take? I have a very important charity luncheon in London. Rebecca turned to address the passengers again, putting on her best customer service voice. I am so sorry for this delay. I know how valuable your time is. We're just trying to ensure everyone's safety and security. Diana felt like screaming. This woman was talking about safety and security as if Diana was some kind of threat. All she had done was show up for a flight she had paid for, with a completely legitimate passport. The co-pilot leaned over to whisper something in Rebecca's ear. Diana couldn't hear what he said, but she saw Rebecca nod and then look at Diana with even more suspicion. Ma'am, Rebecca said, we're going. Gee, to need to see some additional identification. Do you have a driver's license or other ID? Additional identification? Diana repeated. You have my passport. That's the only identification anyone needs for international travel. Yes. But given the concerns about your passport, we need to verify your identity through other means, Rebecca explained. Diana realized that Rebecca was just making up rules as she went along. There was no policy that required additional ID when someone had a valid passport. This was pure harassment and everyone knew it, but Diana decided to comply, hoping it would end this situation faster. She pulled out her wallet and handed over her driver's license and her company credit card. Rebecca examined the driver's license like she was studying an ancient artifact. This address is in California, but you're flying out of Miami. That seems suspicious. I flew here yesterday for a business meeting, Diana explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. I'm continuing on to London for another meeting. This is how business travel works. Rebecca wasn't listening. She had picked up Diana's company credit card and was reading it closely. Richardson Technologies? I've never heard of this company. Diana's eyebrows shot up. You've never heard of Richardson Technologies? We're one of the largest cloud computing companies in the world. We went public 3 years ago. Anyone can get a credit card made with any company name on it, Rebecca said dismissively. That was the last straw. Diana felt her composure finally cracking. Excuse me? Are you seriously suggesting that I had fake credit cards made? I'm just saying it's possible, Rebecca replied with a shrug. The other passengers were watching this exchange with fascination now. Diana realized they were enjoying the show. Here was a successful black woman being humiliated and questioned, and they got to watch it happen while feeling superior. Diana pulled out her phone. Fine. Let me call my assistant and have her verify who I am. But Rebecca held up her hand. Ma'am, you could have anyone on the other end of that phone pretending to be your assistant. That doesn't prove anything. Diana stared at her in disbelief. What would prove anything to you? What exactly do you want me to do? Rebecca seemed to think about this for a moment. Then she said something that made Diana's blood boil. Honestly, I think you should probably look into booking a commercial flight instead. This seems like it might be out of your price range anyway. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the other passengers seemed shocked by how blatant Rebecca's statement was. There was no hiding what this was about anymore. Diana felt every eye in the terminal on her. She was standing there in her expensive business suit, with a legitimate passport and valid credit cards, being told she couldn't afford to be there. The humiliation was overwhelming, but underneath the humiliation was something else. Anger. Pure white-hot anger at the injustice of what was happening. Let me get this straight, Diana said, her voice dangerously quiet. You have examined my passport, which your own security guard confirmed is legitimate. You have looked at my driver's license and my credit cards, and your conclusion is that I can't afford to be here. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably but doubled down. I'm just trying to prevent any problems once we're in the air. If there are issues with payment or documentation, it's better to resolve them now. Issues with payment? Diana repeated. The flight has already been paid for. That's how private jet bookings work. But Rebecca had moved past logic now. She was operating on pure prejudice, and she had an audience of passengers who seemed perfectly content to watch Diana be treated this way. Look, Rebecca said. Maybe there's been some kind of mistake. Maybe someone else booked this flight and you're trying to use their reservation. That would explain the confusion. Diana felt like she was living in an alternate reality. Someone else booked this flight? Are you suggesting I'm trying to steal someone else's airplane ticket? I'm just trying to figure out how all of this adds up, Rebecca said. What doesn't add up, Diana said, her voice rising, is your treatment of a paying passenger based on nothing more than your own biases. The word biases seemed to hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Her face flushed red, and Diana could see she had struck a nerve. This has nothing to do with bias, Rebecca said loudly. This is about following proper security procedures. Security procedures that somehow only apply to me? Diana shot back. I notice you didn't examine any of the other passengers' documents with this level of scrutiny. The other passengers were looking uncomfortable now. They realized Diana was right. None of them had been subjected to anything close to this level of questioning. Rebecca was getting desperate. She could feel the situation slipping away from her, and she was looking for any way to maintain control. That's when she made the biggest mistake of her career. Ma'am, she said, reaching for Diana's passport again. I'm going to need to examine this one more time. But as Rebecca grabbed the passport, her frustration got the better of her. Instead of handling it carefully, she yanked it from Diana's hands with such force that the binding cracked. Diana watched in horror as several pages of her passport tore loose. Years of travel stamps and visa pages scattered to the ground. "Look what you did," Diana exclaimed. But Rebecca, instead of apologizing, saw this as vindication. "See," she announced to everyone, "it's falling apart because it's fake." Diana stared at her damaged passport lying on the floor. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. Rebecca had actually destroyed her official travel document. Diana knelt down and carefully picked up the torn pages of her passport from the terminal floor. Her hands were shaking not from fear, but from the effort it was taking to control her anger. Years of international business travel, dozens of visa stamps, all damaged because of one person's prejudice and ignorance. "You destroyed my passport," Diana said quietly, looking up at Rebecca from where she knelt on the ground. Rebecca crossed her arms, still convinced she was in the right. "I didn't destroy anything. Fake documents fall apart easily. That just proves I was right to be suspicious." Diana stood up slowly, holding the damaged passport and its loose pages in her hands. The other passengers were watching this scene unfold with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Some of them were starting to realize they were witnessing something terrible, but none of them spoke up. "This passport," Diana said, her voice steady despite her anger, "has been through customs in Japan, Germany, Singapore, the United Kingdom, France, and 12 other countries in the past 18 months alone. It was issued by the United States State Department. It is completely legitimate. Anyone can say that," Rebecca replied dismissively. Diana looked around at all the faces staring at her. The co-pilot, the security guard, the passengers waiting to board. Everyone was watching her be humiliated and having her official documents destroyed, and no one was saying a word to stop it. That's when Diana made a decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. The call connected after just one ring. "Good morning, this is Diana," she said into the phone. "I'm standing at Gate 12 at Miami International and I need you to do something for me." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Ma'am, I already told you that having someone pretend to be your assistant isn't going to help your situation." Diana ignored her completely and continued her conversation. "I'm on tail number November 847 Delta Romeo right now, and I need you to confirm something with the flight crew." Rebecca's confident expression flickered for just a moment. Something about the way Diana had rattled off those numbers made her pause. "Please explain to the lead flight attendant exactly who she's been harassing for the past 30 minutes, Diana continued. She walked over to Rebecca and held out her phone. "There's someone who wants to speak with you." Rebecca looked at the phone suspiciously. "I'm not falling for whatever game this is." "Take the phone," Diana said firmly. Something in Diana's tone made Rebecca hesitate. Against her better judgment, she reached out and took the phone. "Hello," she said uncertainly. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Ma'am, this is Jonathan Davis, head of aviation operations for Richardson Technologies. I understand you're currently working aboard aircraft November 847 Delta Romeo." Rebecca's face went pale. "Yes, that's correct." "I need you to understand something very important," Jonathan continued. "The woman you have been questioning and whose passport you just damaged is Diana Richardson. She is the CEO and founder of Richardson Technologies. And more importantly for your current situation, she is the owner of the aircraft you're standing on right now." The phone slipped slightly in Rebecca's hand. She looked at Diana with wide eyes, then back at the phone. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Ma'am, I can assure you it's very possible. Ms. Richardson owns a fleet of 12 aircraft through her company. The jet you're working on today is her personal aircraft. She also owns the charter company that employs you." Rebecca's legs seemed to give out slightly. She reached for the wall to steady herself. "Let me put this in perspective for you," Jonathan continued. "You just destroyed the passport of the person who signs your paychecks. You questioned the right of your boss to board her own airplane." The terminal had gone completely silent. Even the background noise of the airpo RT seemed to fade away as everyone processed what they were hearing. Diana watched as the realization hit Rebecca like a physical blow. The flight attendant's face went from pale to green. Her hands were shaking as she held the phone. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Rebecca stammered into the phone. "There's no mistake," Jonathan replied. Would you like me to read you the aircraft registration? Or perhaps you'd like me to pull up the employment records showing that Ms. Richardson's company is the one that pays your salary. Rebecca looked around desperately, as if someone might tell her this was all a bad dream. But the co-pilot had stepped back from her, suddenly very interested in his clipboard. The security guard was shaking his head in disbelief. Diana took her phone back. Thank you, Jonathan. Please prepare the paperwork for immediate crew replacement. And contact our legal team about the passport situation. Already on it, Jonathan replied. I'll have a new crew there within the hour, and I've contacted the State Department about emergency passport replacement. Diana ended the call and looked directly at Rebecca. Now, do you understand what just happened here? Rebecca opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked like someone had just told her the world was ending. For the past 30 minutes, Diana continued, you have subjected me to harassment, humiliation, and discrimination. You questioned my right to be on this aircraft based on nothing more than your own prejudices. And then, as the final insult, you destroyed my official travel documents. The other passengers were staring in shock. They had just witnessed their fellow passenger being mistreated, and now they were learning that she owned the very airplane they were supposed to fly on. A businessman in an expensive suit stepped forward. Ma'am, I had no idea. If I had known, Diana turned to look at him. If you had known what? That I was successful? That I was wealthy? Would that have made the discrimination acceptable if I had been someone else? The man stepped back, clearly uncomfortable with the question. You all stood here and watched this happen, Diana said, addressing the group of passengers. You watched a paying customer be harassed and humiliated, and none of you said a word. You were perfectly content to let it continue as long as it wasn't happening to you. An older woman with pearls around her neck looked down at her shoes. A younger man in a designer jacket suddenly found his phone very interesting. Diana turned back to Rebecca, who was still standing frozen in shock. You want to know how I can afford to fly private? Diana asked. I built a company from nothing. I worked 18-hour days for years. I took risks, made sacrifices, and earned everything I have. But even with all of that success, I still have to deal with people like you who see my skin color and decide I don't belong. Rebecca finally found her voice. Ms. Richardson, I had no idea. If I had known who you were— Stop right there, Diana interrupted. Don't you dare make this about not knowing who I was. This should never happen to anyone, regardless of who they are or what they own. Every passenger deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Rebecca looked like she might cry. I was just following procedures. What procedures? Diana demanded. Show me the procedure manual that says you should destroy a passenger's passport. Show me the training that taught you to question someone's right to travel based on the color of their skin. Rebecca had no answer, because there was no answer. There were no procedures that justified what she had done. Diana looked around at the crowd that had gathered. Airport employees, passengers from other flights, and even some pilots had stopped to watch the commotion. This is what discrimination looks like, Diana said, loud enough for everyone to hear. It doesn't always come with hoods and crosses. Sometimes it comes in a uniform with a professional smile. Sometimes it comes from people who think they're just doing their job. She held up her damaged passport. This document represents my freedom to travel, to conduct business, to live my life. And it was destroyed not because of any security concern, but because someone decided I didn't look like I belonged here. The crowd was completely silent. Some people looked ashamed, others looked angry, but everyone was listening. Diana turned back to Rebecca one final time. You asked me how I obtained this passport. I obtained it the same way every American citizen does. You asked how I could afford this flight. I can afford it because I work hard and I've been successful. But most importantly, you need to understand that I don't have to justify my existence to you or anyone else. Diana looked at Rebecca with calm determination. The flight attendant was still standing there in shock, holding pieces of Diana's damaged passport in her trembling hands. Rebecca, Diana said quietly, your employment is terminated effective immediately. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Rebecca's face went from green to completely white. You can't fire me, Rebecca stammered. I work for the airline company, not for you. Diana pulled out her phone again and showed Rebecca the screen. It displayed the organizational chart for Skyline Aviation Services, the charter company that operated Diana's fleet. Skyline Aviation Services is a subsidiary of Richardson Technologies, Diana explained patiently. I own the company that employs you. So yes, I absolutely can fire you. Rebecca stared at the phone screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But I have 2 kids. I need this job. I've been working in aviation for 15 years. You should have thought about that before you decided to harass a passenger and destroy federal documents, Diana replied. Your experience in aviation makes this even worse, not better. You knew what you were doing was wrong. The co-pilot who had been standing nearby slowly approached. Ms. Richardson, I want to apologize for not stepping in sooner. What happened here was completely unacceptable. Diana looked at him carefully. What's your name? David Mitchell, he replied nervously. David, you stood there and watched your colleague harass me for 30 minutes. You even participated by examining my passport when she called you over. Did you speak up at any point? David looked down at his feet. No, ma'am, I didn't. Then you're fired too. David's head snapped up. But I didn't do anything wrong. I was just following Rebecca's lead. She's senior to me. Following orders is not an excuse for discrimination, Diana said firmly. You're trained to recognize right from wrong. You knew what was happening was inappropriate, and you chose to go along with it anyway. A small crowd had gathered around the gate now. Other passengers, airport employees, and airline staff were all watching this unprecedented scene unfold. Most of them had their phones out recording everything. Diana noticed the cameras and addressed them directly. I want everyone to see this. I want you all to understand what just happened here and why it matters. She turned back to Rebecca, who was now crying. You asked me earlier how I could afford to fly private. Let me tell you exactly how I got here. Diana's voice carried across the terminal as she spoke. 10 years ago, I was working 3 jobs to support myself while I developed a software program in my tiny apartment. I ate rice and beans for dinner most nights because that's all I could afford. I wore the same business suit to every meeting for 2 years because I couldn't afford another one. Rebecca wiped her eyes but didn't say anything. I pitched my idea to 47 different investors before someone finally gave me a chance. I worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week for 3 years straight. I missed birthdays, holidays, and vacations. I sacrificed everything to build my company. Diana gestured toward the aircraft. This jet represents 15 years of blood, sweat, and tears. It represents every late night I spent coding, every rejection I faced from investors who didn't believe in me, every time someone told me I should give up and get a regular job. She looked directly into one of the cameras. But even after all of that success, even after building a billion-dollar company and employing thousands of people, I still have to deal with this. I still have to prove my right to exist in these spaces. A woman in the crowd called out, "What are you going to do now?" Diana turned toward the voice. First, I'm going to make sure everyone involved in this incident faces appropriate consequences. Second, I'm going to use this experience to make sure it doesn't happen to other people. She looked back at Rebecca. You destroyed my passport, but you also did something else. You showed everyone watching what discrimination looks like in 2025. You reminded us all that we still have work to do. Jonathan, Diana's aviation director, arrived at the terminal with 2 other men in suits. He approached Diana with a concerned expression. I came as soon as I could, he said. I've brought our legal team and we have a replacement crew ready to board. Diana nodded. Thank you. Please make sure Rebecca and David are escorted from the aircraft immediately. I also want their employee access cards revoked and their final paychecks processed according to company policy. What about the other crew members? Jonathan asked. Diana looked toward the aircraft where she could see the remaining flight attendant and the captain watching nervously through the windows. Bring them out here, she said. I want to speak with them. Within minutes, the captain and another flight attendant were standing in front of Diana. Both looked terrified. What are your names? Diana asked. Captain Williams, the pilot said. And this is Lisa, our flight attendant. Diana studied them both. Were either of you aware of what was happening out here? Captain Williams nodded slowly. We could hear raised voices, but we were told it was just a documentation issue. Did either of you come out to see what was going on? No, ma'am, Lisa admitted. Rebecca told us she had it under control. Diana considered this. So you both heard a commotion involving a passenger, and your response was to stay in the aircraft and let Rebecca handle it alone. Captain Williams looked uncomfortable. In hindsight, that was poor judgment on our part. Yes, it was, Diana agreed. As captain, you're responsible for everything that happens on and around your aircraft. As crew members, you have a duty to ensure all passengers are treated appropriately. She paused, watching their faces carefully. However, she continued, you weren't directly involved in the harassment. You made poor decisions, but you didn't participate in discrimination, so I'm not firing you. Both of them visibly relaxed, but Diana added, this will be noted in your employment files, and you will both attend mandatory sensitivity and customer service training before you work another flight. Yes, ma'am, they said in unison. Diana turned to address the crowd of onlookers. I want everyone here to understand something important. What happened today didn't occur in a vacuum. Rebecca didn't wake up this morning and suddenly become prejudiced. This kind of discrimination happens because we allow it to happen. She pointed toward the other passengers who had been waiting to board. All of you witnessed what was happening. You saw a fellow passenger being harassed and humiliated. And what did you do? You stood there and watched. Some of you even complained about the delay. An older businessman stepped forward. Ma'am, we didn't know what was really going on. It looked like a security issue. Did it really? Diana challenged. Or did you see what you expected to see? Did you assume that if a black woman was being questioned aggressively, there must be a good reason for it? The man didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. Diana looked around at all the faces in the crowd. This is how discrimination survives in modern society. Not through open hatred, but through willful blindness. Through people who see injustice happening and choose to look the other way. She walked over to where Rebecca was still standing, now flanked by security officers who had arrived to escort her from the premises. Rebecca, Diana said, I want you to think about something. When you saw me today, what did you see? Rebecca looked up with red, swollen eyes. I don't understand. What did you see when you looked at me? Did you see a successful businesswoman? Did you see a frequent traveler with legitimate documents? Or did you see something else entirely? Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. I guess I saw what I expected to see. And what did you expect to see? Someone who didn't belong here. Diana nodded sadly. That's the problem right there. You decided who I was before I even spoke to you. You let your assumptions override your training, your professionalism, and your basic humanity. The security officers started to lead Rebecca away, but Diana stopped them. Wait, she said. Rebecca, I want you to know that I don't hate you. I'm angry about what you did and there have to be consequences. But I don't hate you as a person. Rebecca looked back at her with surprise. I hope, Diana continued, that you use this experience to become a better person. I hope you think about what happened here and why it happened. And I hope that someday you'll understand why what you did was so harmful. As Rebecca was led away, Diana turned to Jonathan. How long until the new crew is ready? They're on their way now. We should be able to depart within the hour. Diana looked at her damaged passport. And the emergency replacement? The State Department is expediting it. You'll have a temporary document waiting for you in London that will allow you to travel back to the States. Diana nodded and then addressed the remaining passengers. I apologize for the delay. I know you all have important business in London. The new crew will have us airborne shortly. As the crowd began to disperse, Diana remained standing at the gate looking out at her aircraft. The incident was over, but she knew the real work was just beginning. 3 hours later, Diana finally settled into her seat as the jet lifted off from Miami. The new crew had been professional and respectful, treating her exactly as they would any other passenger. But the contrast only made the earlier incident feel more surreal. During the delay, Diana had made several important phone calls. The first was to her legal team, who were already preparing documentation about the damaged passport and the discrimination she had faced. The second was to the State Department, who had expedited her emergency passport replacement. But the most important call was to her publicity team. I want to share this story, Diana had told them. Not for revenge, but for education. People need to see what discrimination looks like in 2025. As the aircraft climbed toward cruising altitude, Diana opened her laptop and began writing. She wanted to document everything that had happened while it was still fresh in her memory. The words flowed easily as she recalled every detail of Rebecca's behavior, every moment of humiliation and every second of silence from the bystanders. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Jonathan. Rebecca Walsh has been calling the office nonstop. She wants to speak with you personally to apologize. Diana stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Not ready for that conversation yet. Maybe someday, but not today. The flight to London gave Diana time to think about what she wanted to do next. She had the power to make sure Rebecca never worked in aviation again. She could pursue legal action that would cost the woman everything, but Diana had learned long ago that revenge and justice weren't the same thing. When the plane landed at Heathrow, Diana was met by a State Department representative who had her emergency travel document ready. The temporary passport would allow her to travel back to the United States while her damaged one was being replaced. "Ms. Richardson," the official said, "I want to personally apologize for what happened to you. Destroying someone's passport is a federal offense and we take it very seriously." Diana thanked him and made her way to the hotel. Her business meeting the next day went exactly as planned. The merger was finalized, making Richardson Technologies one of the 3 largest cloud computing companies in the world. But Diana found it hard to focus on the victory. The incident in Miami kept replaying in her mind. That evening, Diana posted her account of what had happened on her social media accounts. She included photos of her damaged passport and wrote a detailed description of the discrimination she had faced. The post went viral within hours. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people shared their own stories of discrimination while traveling. Business leaders, celebrities, and ordinary citizens all weighed in on the conversation. Passport dignity began trending worldwide, but not all the responses were supportive. Some people criticized Diana for playing the race card, or suggested she had overreacted. Others claimed the incident never happened at all. Diana wasn't surprised by the negative reactions. She had expected them. But she was encouraged by the number of people who were willing to have honest conversations about discrimination and bias. 3 days later, Diana received an unexpected phone call. "Ms. Richardson, this is Rebecca Walsh. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I was hoping you might give me just a few minutes." Diana almost hung up, but something in Rebecca's voice made her pause. "What do you want, Rebecca?" "I want to apologize. Not because my lawyer told me to, and not because I'm trying to get my job back. I want to apologize because I've spent the last 3 days thinking about what I did, and I'm horrified by my own behavior." Diana listened as Rebecca continued. "I've been reading the responses to your post, and I've been reading stories from other people who've faced discrimination. I never realized. I thought I was a good person. I thought I was just doing my job. But I see now that what I did was terrible." "Rebecca," Diana said carefully, "I appreciate that you're taking responsibility for your actions, but an apology doesn't undo the damage you caused." "I know that," Rebecca replied. "I know I can't take back what I did, but I want you to know that I'm getting help. I've started working with a counselor to understand my own biases, and I volunteered to speak at diversity training sessions for other aviation employees." Diana was surprised. This wasn't what she had expected to hear. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Rebecca continued. "I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know that your story has changed me. It's changed how I see the world and how I see myself." After they hung up, Diana sat in her hotel room thinking about the conversation. Change was possible even for someone like Rebecca. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but it was possible. Over the following weeks, Diana used her platform to address discrimination in the travel industry. She worked with airline companies to improve their training programs and helped establish new policies for handling passenger complaints about bias. She also established the Dignity in Travel Foundation, which provided legal support for people who faced discrimination while traveling and funded sensitivity training for travel industry employees. 6 months later, Diana received a letter in the mail. It was from Rebecca, who had completed a year-long program on unconscious bias and cultural sensitivity. She had also been working with the NACP to develop training materials for other aviation professionals. The letter wasn't asking for forgiveness or for her job back. Instead, it was a detailed account of Rebecca's journey toward understanding her own prejudices. She wrote about growing up in a community where she had little contact with people of different races, and how that isolation had shaped her assumptions and fears. "I understand now," Rebecca wrote, "that impact matters more than intent. I may not have intended to be racist, but my actions had a racist impact. That's what matters, and that's what I'm working to change about myself." Diana found herself moved by the letter. She didn't respond immediately. but she kept it on her desk as a reminder that people could change if they were willing to do the difficult work of examining their own biases. A year after the incident, Diana was invited to speak at a conference on diversity in business travel. She stood before an audience of hundreds of travel industry professionals and told her story once again. "What happened to me at Miami International Airport wasn't an isolated incident," she told the audience. "It was part of a pattern of discrimination that affects travelers of color every single day. But it was also an opportunity for education and change." She talked about the importance of bystander intervention, of speaking up when you witness discrimination. She discussed the need for better training and accountability in the travel industry. "The most important lesson I learned," Diana concluded, "is that discrimination thrives in silence. It continues to exist because good people see it happening and choose not to get involved. But when we speak up, when we hold people accountable, when we demand better, change becomes possible." After her speech, a young black woman approached Diana. "Ms. Richardson, I'm starting my own tech company and your story has inspired me. But I have to ask, do you ever regret sharing what happened to you? Do you ever wish you had just stayed quiet?" Diana smiled. "Never. Staying quiet would have meant that Rebecca learned nothing from what she did. It would have meant that other people continued to face the same treatment. It would have meant that nothing changed." She looked out at the audience, where she could see faces of every color and background. "My passport was destroyed that day, but my voice wasn't. And as long as I have a voice, I'm going to use it to fight discrimination wherever I find it." Diana thought about her damaged passport, which she had kept as a reminder of that day. The torn pages and broken binding represented more than just a bureaucratic inconvenience. They represented the barriers that still existed for people of color in professional and social spaces. But they also represented something else: the power of standing up for yourself and others. The importance of using your platform, no matter how big or small, to fight injustice. As Diana left the conference that day, she felt a sense of purpose that went beyond her business success. The incident that had started as a humiliating encounter with prejudice had become a catalyst for positive change. She didn't know if Rebecca had truly changed, or if the training programs she had funded would eliminate discrimination in the travel industry, but she knew that staying silent was never the answer. Diana pulled out her phone and began typing a new social media post. "1 year ago today, my passport was destroyed by prejudice, but my commitment to fighting discrimination has never been stronger. The work continues." She posted the message and then climbed into her car, ready to continue the fight for dignity and equality in whatever form it might take. The jet that had been the scene of her humiliation was waiting at the airport, ready to take her to the next city, the next meeting, the next opportunity to make a difference. As she drove toward the airport, Diana reflected on how much had changed in just 1 year. She was still the same successful businesswoman, still flying on private jets and closing million-dollar deals. But she was also something more now: an advocate, an educator, and a voice for anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. The incident with Rebecca had been painful and humiliating, but it had also been transformative. It had reminded Diana that success alone wasn't enough. True success meant using your achievements to lift others up and create a more just world for everyone. Her passport had been repaired and replaced, but the memory of that day remained as sharp as ever. And that was exactly how Diana wanted it. Some experiences were too important to forget, too powerful to let fade. They became part of who you are and shaped who you choose to become. Diana smiled as she pulled into the airport. She had work to do.